My name is Amelia, and I'm a bank teller at Redwood Savings. For 3 years, I've processed withdrawals, answered questions about interest rates, and exchanged polite smiles with regulars who think they know everything about me. But on one ordinary Tuesday morning, an elderly woman slid a deposit slip across my counter that changed everything. Written on the back in shaky handwriting were words that made my blood run cold. What happened next forced me to make a choice in seconds, a choice that would haunt me for months and teach me that sometimes saving someone means watching them break before they can heal. If you're watching this video right now, I'd love to know where you're from. Drop it in the comment section below. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about the impossible decisions we face when someone's life is in our hands. I've worked at Redwood Savings for 3 years now, and I can tell you exactly how every Tuesday morning unfolds. The fluorescent lights hum at the same pitch. The coffee machine in the break room gurgles at 7:45. By 8:30, the regulars start trickling in, Mrs. Patterson with her pension check, Mr. Kowalski depositing his weekly lottery tickets, always convinced this will be his lucky week. My name is Amelia, and I'm 29 years old. I stand behind window 3, the one closest to the entrance, and I've learned to read people the way some folks read newspapers. You have to in this job. You learn which customers will crack jokes about interest rates, which ones will complain about the wait even when there's no line, and which ones are just lonely and need someone to listen while they cash their Social Security checks. This particular Tuesday started like all the others. I clocked in, exchanged the usual pleasantries with Justin, my coworker who thinks he's funnier than he actually is, and settled into my station. Justin was already teasing me about something, probably about how I triple-check every transaction, or how I've worked here 3 years and never called in sick once. "You ever take a risk, Amelia?" he'd said, grinning as he counted his drawer. "Like, just once, do something spontaneous?" I'd smiled politely, the way I always do, and ignored him. Justin doesn't know that I take risks every single day just by showing up. He doesn't know that 2 years ago, I walked away from an engagement with nothing but a suitcase and my grandmother's necklace. He doesn't know that I still lock my apartment door twice every night, checking the deadbolt 3 times before I can breathe easy enough to sleep. I'm rebuilding my life, one paycheck at a time. I'm saving for my own place, not a rental, but something that's actually mine. Somewhere nobody can take away from me. That's risk enough. Around 10:30, I noticed a black sedan idling in the parking lot. It wasn't unusual. People sit in their cars all the time, finishing phone calls or checking their makeup before coming inside. But something about this one made me pause. The windows were tinted dark, and it had been sitting there for at least 10 minutes, engine running. Earl, our security guard, noticed me looking and wandered over. Earl's in his 60s, retired from the police force, and treats this job like a casual hobby rather than actual work. He glanced outside and shrugged. "Probably just another paranoid husband making sure his wife doesn't spend too much," he said with a chuckle. "You worry too much, Amelia." Maybe he was right. Maybe I do worry too much. But in my experience, the things you don't worry about are usually the things that hurt you most. I went back to my work, processing deposits and withdrawals with mechanical precision. The morning rush had died down, leaving just a handful of customers scattered throughout the lobby. The beeping of the teller machines created a rhythmic backdrop, punctuated by the occasional ring of a phone or the swish of the automatic doors. Then, at exactly 10:42, she walked in. She was an elderly woman, maybe in her 70s, wearing a pale blue cardigan that looked hand-knitted. Her white hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she clutched a brown leather purse against her chest like it contained something precious. What caught my attention immediately was the name tag still pinned to her cardigan, one of those handwritten ones from church events. It read Evelyn in cheerful cursive, with a little hand-drawn flower next to it. Evelyn joined the line at my window, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she fumbled with something in her purse. At first, I thought maybe she had Parkinson's or some other condition. But then I saw her eyes. They kept darting toward the window, toward the parking lot, quick little glances that she tried to hide by adjusting her purse strap or smoothing down her cardigan. When it was her turn, she stepped up to my window with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her face had that practiced composure that comes from years of hiding what you really feel. I recognized it because I'd worn that same expression for 2 years before I finally left. "Good morning," I said warmly. "How can I help you today?" "Savings withdrawal, please," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. She slid a deposit slip across the counter toward me, that tight smile still frozen on her face. I reached for the slip, ready to process a routine withdrawal. But when I flipped it over to check for her account information, my heart stopped. Written in shaky handwriting, barely legible, were words that made my blood run cold. "Don't react. My husband is outside. He has a gun. He'll kill me if I don't withdraw everything." Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. I heard Justin laughing with a customer 2 windows over. The teller machine at Station 5 beeped its completion chime. Somewhere, a phone was ringing, but all of it sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I looked up at Evelyn. Her eyes were pleading, desperate, but her face remained calm, almost serene. Her lips barely moved as she said, "Savings withdrawal, please," again, louder this time, as if she was performing for an audience. My throat went dry. Every instinct screamed at me to look out the window, to find this husband she was talking about, but I forced myself to maintain eye contact with her. "Don't react," the note said. So I didn't. "Of course, ma'am," I heard myself say, my voice surprisingly steady. "Let me just verify your account information. I'll be right back." I took the deposit slip, both sides of it, and walked toward the back office, my legs moving on autopilot. My mind was racing. This couldn't be real. This was the kind of thing you saw in movies, not on a Tuesday morning at a community bank in the suburbs. But the terror in Evelyn's eyes was real. The trembling in her hands was real. And when I glanced out the window as I passed, I saw him. A tall man in a dark coat stood beside the black sedan, the same one I'd noticed earlier. He wasn't moving, wasn't doing anything that would draw attention. He was just standing there, hands in his pockets, staring directly at the bank. At Evelyn's window. His face was expressionless, blank like a mannequin. That's when I knew this wasn't a drill. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was real. I made it to the back office, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack a rib. The security office was tucked in the corner, barely bigger than a closet, with monitors showing grainy footage from 6 different cameras. Earl's coffee mug sat abandoned on the desk, still steaming. My hands shook as I picked up the phone and dialed the silent emergency line, the one that alerts police without triggering the bank's alarm system. We'd been trained on it during orientation, but I never thought I'd actually use it. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. This is Redwood Savings Bank on Maple Street, I whispered, cupping my hand around the receiver. I'm a teller. A customer just handed me a note saying her husband is outside with a gun. He's threatening to kill her if she doesn't withdraw all her money. There was a pause. Can you confirm this is not a robbery in progress? No, it's not. I mean, yes, I can confirm. This is different. She's being held hostage by her husband. He's outside in the parking lot right now. Are you sure she's not part of a setup? The dispatcher asked. Is there any indication this could be a scheme to rob the bank? The question made my stomach twist. I'd heard about distraction robberies before, couples working together to manipulate bank employees into handing over cash. But something about Evelyn's eyes, the way her hands trembled, the note written in desperation rather than deception, it felt genuine. I'm sure, I said, though doubt crept in at the edges of my certainty. Please, just send someone. Officers are being dispatched. Nearest unit is approximately 12 minutes away. Stay on the line and keep monitoring the situation. Do not alert the subject that police have been called. 12 minutes. It felt like an eternity. I hung up and turned to the security monitors. One camera showed Evelyn still standing at my window, now chatting with Justin, who'd wandered over to help. She was smiling, gesturing with her hands like they were discussing the weather. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was just another friendly customer. But I did know better. Another camera showed the parking lot. The man in the dark coat had moved closer to the entrance. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face. Even through the grainy footage, I could see his eyes fixed on the glass doors, watching, waiting. I thought about my ex, Derek. How he used to smile at my friends, charm my family, play the role of the perfect boyfriend. And then, when we were alone, the mask would drop. The control would start, small at first, then suffocating.
Don't wear that.
Why are you talking to him? You're being dramatic. Nobody else would put up with you. It took me 2 years to recognize that the person who claimed to love me was actually imprisoning me. Another 6 months to find the courage to leave. Looking at Evelyn on that monitor, I saw myself. And I knew I couldn't let her walk out of here with that man. I grabbed Evelyn's ID from my desk. I'd asked for it before walking away, and deliberately placed it in the wrong file drawer. Then I returned to my window, forcing my expression into professional neutrality. "I apologize for the delay, Mrs. Henderson," I said, making a show of looking at my computer screen. "Our system is running a bit slow this morning. It'll just be a few more minutes while I pull up your account." Evelyn nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. "That's perfectly fine, dear. Take your time." Justin, who'd been making small talk with her, frowned at me. "The system's fine, Amelia. I just processed 3 transactions." I shot him a look, a sharp, pointed look that said drop it. But Justin being Justin, he didn't drop it. He just watched me with growing suspicion, his friendly demeanor shifting to concern. That's when the bell above the entrance chimed. The man in the dark coat walked in. Everything in the lobby seemed to tighten, the air growing heavier. Evelyn's shoulders stiffened immediately, though her smile never faltered. The man moved with deliberate calm, his coat hanging open just enough that I could see it, the outline of a gun tucked into his waistband. My breath caught in my throat. He walked directly to Evelyn and placed his hand on her shoulder. It looked casual, affectionate even, like a loving husband checking in on his wife. But I saw Evelyn's knuckles go white as she gripped her purse. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" His voice was low, controlled. "Just finishing up," Evelyn said brightly. "The nice young lady is helping me with the withdrawal." His eyes shifted to me. They were cold, calculating, assessing. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "Is there a problem?" he asked me. "No problem at all, sir," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "Just verifying the account. Won't be much longer." I pulled out another withdrawal slip and slid it across the counter toward Evelyn, along with a pen. Beneath the slip, I'd tucked a small piece of notepaper with 4 words written on it. "Help is coming. Stay calm." Evelyn's hand shook as she reached for the pen. For a moment, I thought she'd manage it, but her fingers fumbled and the pen rolled off the counter, clattering to the floor. The man's hand tightened on her shoulder. Just for a second, but I saw it. Saw the way Evelyn winced, saw the flash of something dark cross his face before the calm mask returned. "Let me help with that," he said, reaching for the withdrawal slip. His eyes never left mine. "Mind if I handle the paperwork? My wife's hands aren't what they used to be." He took the pen from Evelyn and began filling out the form with practiced ease. His signature was confident, almost aggressive in its strokes. As he wrote, I noticed faint scars across his knuckles, the kind you get from hitting things. Or people. Justin chose that moment to wander back over, either oblivious to the tension or too curious to care. "Big withdrawal, huh?" he said with his trademark grin. "Special occasion?" The man's jaw tightened. "Emergency expenses." "Ah, I hear that. Well, Amelia here will take good care of you. She's our most thorough teller." Justin winked at me, trying to lighten the mood. But all I could think was, he knows. The man knows I'm stalling. He knows someone else is watching. The man leaned closer to my window, his voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear. "I've been watching you since she came in. If you do anything stupid, I'll make sure you regret it." Ice flooded my veins. Evelyn's lips barely moved as she breathed one word. "Please." Through my earpiece, the dispatcher's voice crackled. "Units are 2 minutes out. Keep the subjects calm and in place." 2 minutes. I looked at the clock. I looked at Evelyn, whose exhaustion showed in every line of her face. This wasn't the first time. This was a woman who'd been living in fear so long it had become her normal. I pretended to count cash, my hands moving slowly, deliberately. My mind raced between two impossible choices: hand over the money and let Evelyn leave with this man, knowing what might happen to her, or stall long enough for police to arrive and risk him doing something violent right here, right now, with a lobby full of innocent people. Then I saw it through the window. A police cruiser stopping at the red light half a block away, lights off but unmistakably official. And the man saw it too. His eyes narrowed. His hand moved toward his waistband. "Forget the withdrawal," he said coldly, his voice like gravel. "We're leaving." He grabbed Evelyn's arm and yanked her toward the door. And in the distance, growing louder, I heard the wail of sirens. Everything happened in seconds, but each second felt like an hour. The automatic door had locked, one of those timed security features that activates during system updates. We'd all gotten the memo about it yesterday, how it would engage for 90 seconds at random intervals throughout the day. I'd completely forgotten until I saw the man yank on the door handle and find it unmoving. His head whipped around, eyes blazing with sudden panic. "Open it," he snarled at Earl, who'd been standing near the entrance, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Earl set down his coffee slowly, his retired cop instincts finally kicking in. "Sir, it's an automatic system lock. It'll release in about a minute. Open it now." "I don't have an override." "None of us do." The man's hand went to his waistband. Evelyn made a small, choked sound. "I had to do something. Had to keep this from escalating." "Sir," I called out, my voice bright with false cheer, "I just need you to sign one more form for the withdrawal. It'll only take a second, and by the time you're done, the door will be unlocked." It was a desperate play, but it worked. His attention snapped back to me, suspicion and calculation warring across his face. After a moment, he dragged Evelyn back to my window, positioning himself so he could watch both me and the entrance. I slid a blank form across the counter. As I did, I tucked another note beneath it, this one reading: "Help is coming. Stay calm." But my hands were shaking now, and Evelyn noticed. When she reached for the form, her trembling fingers knocked over the pen again. This time, it rolled behind her, and when she bent to retrieve it, the man's hand clenched hard on her shoulder. "I'll handle it," he said again, his voice tight. He picked up the pen and thrust it into her hand. "Sign." "Sir, I actually need your signature as well, since you're the joint account holder," I improvised, sliding another form toward him. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached across the counter and scrawled his name with sharp, angry strokes. "George Henderson." The signature looked practiced, confident, but his knuckles were white around the pen. Those scars on his hands seemed more prominent now, raised and angry. That's when Justin made everything worse. He'd been watching from his window, and I'd seen him pull out his phone a few minutes ago. Now he walked over with that same oblivious friendliness and said, "Everything okay over here? Amelia, you need help with something?" "We're fine," I said quickly. "Big withdrawal, you said?" Justin looked at the form, then at George. "Must be quite an emergency." George's jaw worked.
"Yeah.
Emergency expenses. Well, you picked a good bank. We take care of our customers." Justin grinned at Evelyn. "Right, ma'am?" Evelyn managed a nod, but I saw tears gathering in her eyes. Justin finally seemed to sense something was wrong. His smile faltered. He looked at me, then at George, then back at me. "Amelia?" George leaned closer to my window, his voice dropping so low only I could hear it. "I've been watching you since she came in. If you do anything stupid, I'll make sure you regret it." The words hit me like a physical blow. They were almost identical to things Derek used to say. "If you tell anyone, I'll make sure you lose everything. If you leave, I'll make sure nobody believes you."
But I left anyway.
And I survived. I met George's eyes and saw something I hadn't expected: desperation. Not just anger or control, but genuine, bone-deep desperation. This wasn't a man who'd planned this. This was a man who'd lost control of his own life and was grasping at any way to get it back. Evelyn's lips barely moved as she whispered, "Please. Not please help me. Just please. As if she was begging the whole universe to make the stop. Through my earpiece, the dispatcher's voice crackled. 2 units inbound. ETA 90 seconds. The police were close. So close. I just had to keep everyone calm for 90 more seconds. I pretended to type on my computer, making a show of pulling up account information. I'm so sorry for the delay. The system is asking for secondary verification. It's a new security measure for large withdrawals. How large are we talking? George asked sharply. I glanced at the form where Evelyn had written the amount earlier, before he'd taken over. She'd requested to withdraw every penny from their joint savings. $42,000. Anything over $30,000 requires manager approval. I lied. Let me just call him real quick.
No.
George's hand moved toward his waistband again. No calls. Just give us the money. I can't without approval. I could lose my job. You're going to lose more than your job if you don't. That's when I saw it through the window. A police cruiser pulling into the parking lot, lights still off but definitely, unmistakably present. George saw it at the exact same moment. His face transformed. The mask of control shattered, replaced by pure animal panic. He grabbed Evelyn's arm hard enough to make her gasp and yanked her away from my window. You called them, he hissed. You fucking called them. I didn't. Evelyn started, but he cut her off. Not you. His eyes locked on mine, full of rage and betrayal. Her. Earl was moving now, his hand going to the service weapon he wore on his hip. Sir, you need to calm down. Stay back. George pulled the gun from his waistband, a black semi-automatic that looked too heavy in his shaking hand. Screams erupted throughout the lobby. Customers dropped to the floor. Justin ducked behind his station. I stood frozen, my hands still on my keyboard, every muscle in my body locked. Sir, put the weapon down. Earl had his own gun drawn now, trained on George. But George wasn't listening. He backed toward the corner of the lobby, dragging Evelyn with him, the gun waving erratically between Earl and me and the doors where the police were now visible, taking positions behind their vehicles. I just wanted to leave, George shouted. We were just going to take our money and leave. Then put the gun down, and we can talk about it, Earl said, his voice steady despite the sweat on his forehead. They'll arrest me. She'll leave. She's always threatening to leave. George's voice cracked. I can't lose her. Not her too. Evelyn was crying now, openly, her careful composure finally breaking. George, please. Please put it down. The standoff stretched. Through the window, I could see more police arriving, taking positions. Someone was shouting into a megaphone, but I couldn't make out the words over the rushing in my ears. I looked at Evelyn, and she looked back at me. In her eyes, I saw something that shocked me. She wasn't just scared. She was exhausted. This wasn't the first crisis. This was just the latest in a long line of incidents that had worn her down to nothing. And in that moment, I made a decision. I stepped out from behind my station. Don't. Earl barked at me. But I kept moving, slowly, hands visible. Mr. Henderson, my name is Amelia. I'm the one who helped your wife.
Can we talk?
George swung the gun toward me. Stay back. I just want to talk. That's all. I kept my voice soft, non-threatening. I know you're scared.
I can see that.
This isn't what you planned, is it? You don't know anything about me. I know you love your wife. I can see that too. You don't want to hurt her. Then why did she call them? He shook Evelyn, making her stumble. Why would she call the police? She didn't. I took another small step. I did. But not because I thought you were a bad person. I did it because that note scared me. I thought she was in danger. She is in danger. George's voice rose to a shout. Don't you get it? I'm trying to protect her. From what? From herself. From leaving. From forgetting. He was sobbing now, tears streaming down his face, the gun still pointed but trembling. She wants to forget him. She wants to erase him like he never existed. Him? Evelyn's face crumpled. George? No. That's not. Our son. George screamed. Our son died, and she wants to move on. She wants to sell the house. She wants to leave. But if we leave, then what? Then he's really gone. The pieces clicked together. The grief. The desperation.
The gun.
This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't even really domestic violence, though it had all the hallmarks. This was a man drowning in grief and taking everyone down with him. The megaphone voice outside became clearer. A police negotiator, calling for George to release Evelyn and come out peacefully. But George wasn't listening. He was somewhere else entirely, trapped in a memory that was eating him alive. "When did you lose your son?" I asked softly. George's eyes focused on me, surprised by the question. 2 years ago. He was 15. It was my fault. George, don't. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. It was my fault, he repeated louder. I kept the gun in the bedroom. In the nightstand. He was just looking for batteries. He didn't know it was loaded. I always said I'd put it in the safe, but I never did, and one day he found it and it went off and… His voice broke completely. The gun sagged in his hand. Earl still had his weapon trained on George, but I could see he was listening now, really listening. The anger in his cop eyes had shifted to something more complex. Pity, maybe. Understanding. "Mr. Henderson," I said carefully, "what happened to your son was an accident."
Un terrible, horrible accident.
But this, what you're doing right now, this isn't going to bring him back. I know that. George's face twisted with anguish. Don't you think I know that? But I can't. I can't let go. If I let go, then I killed my son for nothing. If we move on, if we leave that house, if we forget. We're not forgetting him, Evelyn said, her voice stronger now. George, we're not. I could never forget him. But I can't live in that house anymore. Every room is full of his ghost. I can't breathe there. I can't sleep. I can't, because you blame me. George looked at her, the gun momentarily forgotten. You blame me and you're leaving me, and I'll be all alone with what I did. I don't blame you, Evelyn said, and her voice carried such weight of truth that everyone in the lobby seemed to feel it. I blame myself. Every single day, I blame myself for not checking the nightstand.
For not being home that day.
For not hearing him call out. I blame myself, George. And I can't carry that blame in that house for one more second. The gun in George's hand was shaking so badly, now I was afraid it would go off by accident. Earl saw it too. He took a step forward, weapon still raised. Sir, I need you to put the gun on the floor. Nice and slow. But George wasn't done. He looked at me again, his eyes wild. You don't understand. The note, it wasn't because I was going to hurt her. I would never hurt her. But I needed the money. I needed all of it because if she has nothing, she can't leave.
She'll have to stay.
We'll have to work it out. My stomach turned. Financial control. That's what this was. Take away her resources, take away her ability to escape, and she'd have no choice but to stay. I'd lived that reality. Derek had done the same thing to me, controlled the bank accounts, made sure my name wasn't on the lease, kept me dependent. It took me months of secret saving, hiding cash in tampon boxes and coat pockets, before I had enough to run. Mr. Henderson, holding someone hostage isn't love. It's prison. You don't know what love is, he spat. Love is staying. Love is not giving up. Love is also letting go when you're hurting each other. A gunshot cracked through the lobby. For a moment, I thought George had fired. But then I saw Earl, his weapon smoking, and George stumbling backward, clutching his shoulder. The pistol clattered to the tile floor, sliding several feet away. Evelyn screamed and dropped to her knees beside George as police rushed through the doors, shouting commands I couldn't process. My ears were ringing. The world had gone fuzzy at the edges. Someone grabbed my arm. Justin, pulling me away from the chaos. I watched as officers swarmed George, securing the weapon, calling for paramedics. Earl was speaking rapidly into his radio. Customers were crying, calling loved ones, trying to make sense of what had just happened. And through it all, I heard Evelyn's voice, breaking through the noise. I told you not to bring it. I told you, George. Why didn't you listen? She was cradling his face in her hands, blood spreading across his shirt, her tears falling onto his cheeks. And despite everything, the gun, the threats, the terror, she looked at him with something that might have been love or might have been grief or might have been both, inseparably tangled together. George's eyes fluttered. He gasped something I couldn't hear over the chaos. Then his hand, the one not clutching his shoulder, reached up and touched Evelyn's face with surprising gentleness. "I wasn't going to hurt you," he whispered, loud enough now that I could hear it. "I just wanted you to listen." Then his eyes rolled back, and his hand fell away. Paramedics were there instantly, pushing Evelyn aside, working on George with professional efficiency. Someone was telling me to sit down. Someone else was pushing a bottle of water into my hands. The bank's alarm system, finally triggered by the gunshot, was blaring so loud it felt like it was splitting my skull. I watched them load George onto a stretcher. Watched them wheel him out through doors that had finally unlocked. Watched Evelyn follow, looking small and ancient and utterly broken. And I wondered, as police officers began taking statements and crime scene techs started photographing bullet holes, if I had done the right thing. I called the police because I thought I was saving someone. But looking at Evelyn's face as she climbed into the ambulance behind her husband, I wasn't sure who I'd saved or what I'd cost them. The police kept me at the bank for 3 hours, asking the same questions in slightly different ways. What time did she arrive? When did you see the note? Did he make any verbal threats? Did you feel your life was in danger? I answered everything mechanically, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Yes, I called 911. Yes, I stalled deliberately. Yes, I stepped out from behind the counter, even though Earl told me not to. No, I don't know why I did that. But that last part was a lie. I knew exactly why I did it. I did it because I saw myself in Evelyn. Because I knew what it felt like to be trapped by someone who claimed they loved you. Because I spent 2 years being controlled by Derek, and when I finally escaped, nobody stepped in to help me. I had to save myself. Maybe I thought I could give Evelyn something I never had, someone who saw what was happening and refused to look away. By the time they let me go, it was almost 3 in the afternoon. The bank was closed, yellow crime scene tape crisscrossing the entrance. News vans had gathered outside, reporters doing stand-ups in front of the building, their voices carrying on the wind. Hostage situation at Redwood Savings. Domestic dispute turned violent. Heroic bank teller who called police. Heroic. The word made me feel sick. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. When I finally made it to my apartment, I walked inside, locked the door once, twice, 3 times, and then collapsed on my couch. That's when the shaking started. My whole body trembled, teeth chattering, hands convulsing like they belonged to someone else. I wrapped my arms around myself and rocked back and forth, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving nothing but exhaustion and guilt. Did I do the right thing? The question circled in my mind like a vulture. George was in the hospital with a gunshot wound. Evelyn was somewhere, probably beside his bed, her life shattered into even smaller pieces than before. And me? Everyone was calling me a hero. But heroes don't wonder if they made things worse. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke to darkness and the sound of my phone ringing. I fumbled for it, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. Hello. Silence on the other end. Then breathing, soft and steady. Hello. I said again, louder this time. You don't know what really happened that day. The voice was female, soft, familiar. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heart racing again. That voice, was it Evelyn? It had to be. But why call me? Why say that? I tried calling back, but it went straight to a generic voicemail. I sat in the dark for a long time, the phone clutched in my hand, trying to make sense of it. The next morning, I found something on my doorstep. A manila envelope, no postage, no return address. Just my name written in shaky handwriting across the front. I picked it up with trembling fingers and brought it inside. Inside was a church pamphlet, one of those cheaply printed programs from a weekly service. Someone had circled Evelyn's name on the volunteer list. Beneath it was a photograph, worn at the edges like it had been carried in a wallet for years. It showed a teenage boy with sandy hair and George's eyes, smiling at the camera. He wore a basketball jersey and held a trophy. On the back, someone had written, Marcus. State championship. 3 months before. 3 months before he died. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This was their son. The boy George couldn't let go of. The ghost that haunted their marriage. I called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I looked up Officer Daniels, one of the responding officers from yesterday, and called the station. I need to know how they're doing, I told him. George and Evelyn Henderson. I was the teller. I need to know. There was a long pause. Then, George is in critical condition but stable. The bullet hit his shoulder, missed the major arteries. He'll live. And Evelyn? She refused to press charges. Says it was all a misunderstanding. She's at the hospital now, hasn't left his side. A misunderstanding. The word echoed in my head. How could any of what happened be called a misunderstanding? Can I see her? I asked. I just want to talk to her. I don't think that's a good idea. Please. Another pause. She's at County General.
But I didn't tell you that.
I drove to the hospital with the photograph in my purse, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know what I was going to say to her. I just knew I needed to see her face, needed to understand what she'd meant on the phone. County General smelled like antiseptic and desperation. I found Evelyn in the surgical wing's waiting room, sitting in a plastic chair that looked like it had been uncomfortable for about 30 years. She wore the same pale blue cardigan from yesterday, now wrinkled and stained with what might have been coffee or might have been blood. When she saw me, she didn't look surprised. She just nodded, as if she'd been expecting me. I know why you came, she said quietly. You want to ask if you made the right call. I sat down beside her, my throat tight. Did I? Evelyn was silent for a long moment, staring at her hands. They were still trembling just like they had been at my window. Maybe they never stopped. He wasn't supposed to bring the gun, she finally said. I wrote that note to protect him from himself. The words hit me like cold water.
What?
George has been spiraling for 2 years. Ever since Marcus died. He became convinced that I was trying to erase our son's memory. When I suggested we downsize, maybe move to a smaller place, he thought I wanted to abandon everything that reminded us of Marcus. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. I wasn't trying to forget. I was trying to survive. The withdrawal was supposed to be quiet. We were going to take our savings and move away together, start fresh somewhere new. I thought maybe if we left that house, left all those memories, we could begin to heal. Her voice cracked. But when we got to the bank, he had the gun. I saw it when we were in the car. He said he needed it for protection, that he didn't trust anyone anymore. And I knew if we went in there together, something terrible would happen. So you wrote the note. I wanted someone to stop him before he did something he couldn't take back. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought if the police came, they'd see he needed help. They'd get him into treatment. But instead, she broke off, covering her face with her hands. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. All this time, I'd thought I was rescuing her from him. But she'd been trying to rescue him from himself. You saved my life, Evelyn said, looking at me with something that might have been gratitude or might have been accusation. But I lost what was left of his. I didn't know what to say to that. How do you respond when someone tells you that your good intentions destroyed their last hope? There's something else, Evelyn said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this in George's jacket pocket while the paramedics were working on him. He must have written it before we came to the bank. She handed it to me. I unfolded it with shaking hands. The handwriting was jagged, desperate. If you're reading this, I lost control again. She stays because she pities me. Don't call me a monster. Just stop me before I make her disappear too. The last line made my blood run cold. Make her disappear. He didn't mean kill me, Evelyn said quickly, seeing my expression. He meant lose me. He was terrified I'd leave, and in his mind, that would be the same as me disappearing. Like Marcus disappeared. I read the note again, and this time I saw it differently. Not a threat, but a plea. A man begging someone, anyone, to intervene before his grief consumed everything he had left. He'd been calling 911, Evelyn continued. For weeks. Always from payphones. Always hanging up before they could trace it. He was trying to report himself, trying to get help, but he could never follow through. Until I called for him, I whispered. Until you called for him, she echoed. We sat in silence for a while. Around us, the hospital continued its rhythms. Nurses walking past, machines beeping, the distant sound of someone crying in another room. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said finally. That look in your eyes yesterday when you read my note. You understood immediately. Why? I'd been waiting for this question. I was in a relationship like that once. Different circumstances, but the same feeling of being trapped. I left 2 years ago. Did someone help you?
No.
I had to save myself. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then you gave me something you never had. Someone who saw and acted. She squeezed my hand, even if the outcome wasn't what either of us expected. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Henderson, your husband is awake.
He's asking for you.
Evelyn stood, smoothing down her cardigan. She looked at me one more time. Thank you, Amelia, for caring when you didn't have to. Then she walked through those doors, and I sat alone in the waiting room, the note still clutched in my hand. When I got home that evening, my answering machine was blinking. I pressed play, half expecting another hang-up. Instead, Evelyn's voice filled my small apartment. Check the drawer under your station. He left you something. I shouldn't have gone back to the bank. It was closed for investigation, and I definitely didn't have permission to enter. But I couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn's message. What could George have possibly left for me? I used my key to slip in through the back entrance around midnight, my heart hammering. The lobby was dark, illuminated only by emergency exit signs. Yellow evidence markers dotted the floor where George had stood, where the gun had fallen, where his blood had pooled. I forced myself not to look at them as I made my way to my station. The drawer under my counter was shallow, usually containing nothing but extra deposit slips and pens. But when I pulled it open, I saw a small envelope wedged in the back corner. It was slightly crumpled, with a dark stain on one edge that I tried not to think about too hard. My name was written on it in that same jagged handwriting from the note Evelyn had shown me. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, written on lined paper torn from a notebook. The handwriting deteriorated as it went, as if he'd been writing in a moving car or with shaking hands. Maybe both. Dear Amelia, if you're reading this, things went bad. I knew they would. I've been messing everything up for 2 years now. Can't sleep. Can't eat. Can't stop seeing his face. I killed my son. People say it was an accident, but accidents happen because of mistakes, and I made the mistake. I left the gun loaded in the nightstand. I'd been meaning to put it in the safe for months, but I kept forgetting. And one day Marcus was looking for batteries, and he found it instead. Evelyn tells me it's not my fault, but she's lying to make me feel better. I can see it in her eyes. She blames me. How could she not? I blame me too. She wants to leave. Not me, the house. The memories. She says she can't breathe there anymore. But if we leave, then what? Then we're people who had a son who died, and we moved on? We're not those people. We can't be those people. I've been trying to get help, calling that 911 number over and over. But every time someone answers, I can't speak. What would I even say? Help, I'm afraid of what I might do. They'd lock me up or laugh at me or both. The gun, I know I shouldn't have brought it. Evelyn's right about that. But I can't leave it at home anymore. Every time I look at it, I see Marcus. Every time I touch it, I feel his blood on my hands, even though I wasn't there when it happened. Taking it with me feels safer somehow.
I don't know why.
I'm writing this before we go to the bank, because I can feel it coming. That darkness. That panic. I can feel myself losing control again, and I don't trust myself anymore. If things go bad, I need you to know, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to stop hurting. Evelyn stays because she pities me. Because she's a good person who made vows and meant them. But I can see it killing her, day by day. She's disappearing right in front of me, and I'm the one making her disappear. You remind me of him. Of Marcus.
Something about your eyes.
The way you focus when you're concentrating. He used to do that too, especially when he was drawing. He loved to draw. Did you know that? Probably not. Why would you? I don't know what I'm trying to say. Maybe just thank you. For seeing something was wrong. For not pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Don't call me a monster. I'm just a father who can't save anyone, not even himself. George. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. By the time I finished the 3rd read, I was sitting on the floor behind my station, my back against the counter, sobbing into my hands. He knew. George knew he was losing control, knew he was hurting Evelyn, knew he needed help. And he tried to get it. He tried to save himself and failed, over and over, until the moment he walked into my bank with a gun and a desperate plan that was doomed from the start. I thought about all the times people said Derek just needed help, that he didn't mean to hurt me, that I should give him another chance. I thought about how I'd hardened myself against those pleas, how I'd learned that love without boundaries is just another form of prison. But George wasn't Derek. Derek knew exactly what he was doing. He chose control, chose manipulation, chose to make me smaller, so he could feel bigger. George was drowning in guilt and grief, reaching out for help in the only ways he knew how, and nobody could hear him until it was too late. I don't know how long I sat there on that cold tile floor. Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to stand, to fold the letter carefully and put it in my purse, to lock up the bank and drive home through empty streets. The next day, I went back to the hospital. A month passed before the bank reopened. They'd patched the bullet hole in the ceiling, replaced the bloodstained tiles, installed new glass where cracks had spiderwebbed from the chaos. Everything looked exactly the same as before, but it felt completely different. Like a stage set designed to look normal while everyone pretended the show hadn't been canceled. They held a ceremony on my first day back. The regional manager gave a speech about bravery and quick thinking. They presented me with a plaque in recognition of exceptional service, and everyone clapped while cameras flashed. I smiled for the photos because that's what you do. But inside, I felt hollow. That evening, I found Evelyn waiting outside the hospital where George had been transferred to the psychiatric wing. She looked smaller somehow, like the past month had compressed her into something more fragile. "They're giving him this," I said, holding out the plaque. "But it should be yours. You're the one who made the impossible choice." Evelyn touched the plaque gently, then shook her head.
No, dir.
"You're the one who saw the truth. I just lived it." "How is he?" "Getting better.
Slowly.
The medication is helping. The therapy is helping. He talks about Marcus now without breaking down. That's progress." She smiled faintly. "He asks about you sometimes. Wants to know if you're okay." "I don't know if I am," I admitted. We sat together on a bench outside the hospital, watching the sun set over the parking lot. Evelyn told me she'd started volunteering at a grief support group, helping other families who'd lost children to gun violence and accidents. She said it made her feel less alone, gave purpose to their pain. "You can't undo what happened," she said. "You can't bring Marcus back or rewrite that day at the bank. But you can decide what to do with what you learned." Her words stayed with me as I drove home. What had I learned? That good intentions can have complicated outcomes? That sometimes saving someone means watching them break before they can heal? That the line between victim and perpetrator is sometimes blurrier than we want to believe? All of that, maybe. But something else too. I'd learned that I couldn't save everyone. That sometimes the best you can do is bear witness, call for help, and hope it's enough. And that the weight of those choices, even the right ones, would stay with you forever. 2 weeks later, I handed in my notice at Redwood Savings. Justin threw me a going-away party that felt both too cheerful and deeply melancholy. Earl gave me a gruff handshake and told me I had good instincts. The regional manager tried to convince me to stay. But I couldn't. Every time I stood behind that counter, I saw Evelyn's trembling hands. Heard George's voice cracking as he screamed about his son. felt the moment I decided to step out from behind my station and walk toward a man with a gun. I enrolled in a crisis counseling program. It would take 2 years to complete, but I had time. I had purpose. Maybe I could learn to catch the next cry for help before it reached the breaking point. Maybe I could be what George needed, but never found. On my last day at the bank, I found something tucked behind my station, a receipt from the day of the incident. On the back, in Evelyn's neat handwriting, "Thank you for listening." I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet, next to the photograph of Marcus I'd kept all this time. 3 months later, I was walking through the community center, where I'd started my practicum hours, when I saw her. A young woman, maybe early 20s, sitting in the waiting area. She was clutching her purse the same way Evelyn had, with that same tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her boyfriend sat beside her, his hand on her knee in a gesture that looked caring but felt controlling. She glanced up at me, and our eyes met. In that brief moment, I saw recognition. Not of me specifically, but of what I represented. Someone who might see what she was too afraid to say out loud. I took a deep breath and walked over. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice gentle.
I'm Amelia.
"I'm a counselor here. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" The boyfriend's hand tightened on her knee. "We're fine. Just waiting for her appointment." "Actually," the young woman said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'd like to talk. Just for a minute." She stood up, and for a second, I thought the boyfriend would stop her. But something in my expression must have told him this wasn't a battle he'd win. Not here. Not now. As we walked toward my office, she slipped a piece of paper into my hand. I unfolded it once we were alone. "Help. He tracks my phone. Can't call." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw myself 5 years ago. Scared.
Trapped.
Desperate for someone to notice. "You're safe here," I told her. "Let's figure this out together." She started crying, and I handed her tissues, and we began the long, difficult work of untangling her life from someone who claimed to love her but was slowly erasing her instead. Later that night, as I locked at my office and walked to my car, I thought about George's letter, about how he said I reminded him of Marcus, about how sometimes the people we save aren't the people we think we're saving. Maybe I couldn't save George or Evelyn or even that young woman in my office. Not really. Salvation is something you have to choose for yourself, day after day, decision after decision. But I could be there. I could listen. I could see what others missed and refuse to look away, even when it was easier to pretend everything was fine. The fluorescent lights in the parking lot hummed the same way they had at the bank. For a moment, I was back behind that counter, reading Evelyn's note, making the choice that would change all of our lives. Would I do it again, knowing what I know now?
Yes.
1,000 times yes. Because the alternative, seeing someone drowning and walking away, that's something I couldn't live with. That's a weight I refused to carry. I got in my car and drove home through streets that felt less dangerous than they used to, less full of shadows and threat. I unlocked my door once, just once, and smiled at the small victory of that single lock. Progress, not perfection. And as I settled in for the night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for today. For seeing me. Rachel." Rachel. The young woman from the waiting room. She'd taken the first step. I typed back, "You're not alone. A call anytime." Then I set my phone down and looked at the plaque they'd given me at the ceremony, now propped on my bookshelf, in recognition of exceptional service. I still didn't feel like a hero, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the real work happened in the quiet moments, in the small acts of witness, in the choice to listen when someone finally found the courage to speak. Sometimes the quietest cries for help don't come through sirens or dramatic standoffs. They come through notes you were never meant to read, through text messages sent in secret, through eyes that plead across a counter or a waiting room. And if you're lucky, if you're paying attention, you hear them just in time. When someone hands you a cry for help, do you intervene and risk making things worse, or do you walk away and live with what might have happened? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about the choices that define us.